Hey, what's up, guys? You're now listening to Devo with Uncle Theo. Today is day 85, and we're going to cover Judges chapter 10 and 11. Last time we left off, we covered Gideon and Gideon's son, Abimelech. Those were our fifth and sixth judges. And now we're going to pick up with two judges that will be easy to look over in chapter 10. If you blink, you'll miss them. The first one is Tola. He's found in Judges 10, 1 and 2. And we just get a quick summary of him. It says, he lived in Shamir in the hill country of Ephraim, and he led Israel 23 years. Then he died. So remember our cycle. God raises up a judge. He gives them a time of peace, and they repeat the cycle again. They sin. They cry out to God. He raises up another judge. And so here are two quick ones, Tola, and then in verse 3, Jair. It says he was followed by Jair of Gilead, and he led Israel for 22 years. So don't let those slip up on you. Judges number 7 and 8 could sneak by you, Tola and Jair. But again, remember our cycle. It happens again in verse 6. It says, then the sons of Israel again did evil in the sight of the Lord, served the Baals and the Ashtoreth. And I ask you, are you getting tired of this? Have you seen enough of this cycle? It's vicious, isn't it? It happens over and over and over again. And it says, then the sons of Israel again did evil in the sight of the Lord, served the Baal and the Ashtoreth, the gods of Aram, the gods of Sidon, the gods of Moab, the gods of Ammon, the gods of the Philistines. Thus they forsook the Lord and did not serve him. The anger of the Lord burned against Israel, and he sold them into the hands of the Philistines and into the hands of the sons of Ammon. They afflicted and crushed the sons of Israel that year for 18 years. They afflicted all the sons of Israel who were beyond the Jordan. And you see that? They're going right back into that cycle because they sin again. And then they're going to cry out. Here it is, verse 10. Then the sons of Israel cried out to the Lord, saying, we have sinned against you. For indeed, we have forsaken our God and served the Baals. The Lord said to the sons of Israel, did I not deliver you from the Egyptians, the Amorites, the sons of Ammon, and the Philistines? And God mocks him a little. He said, listen, verse 14, go and cry out to the gods which you have chosen. Let them deliver you in the time of your distress. Similar to what Joshua was saying, right? In Joshua 24, pick your God. If you're going to go after those guys, and when you have problems and distress, hey, don't come back crying to me. Cry out to them. If you love them so much and pursue them in pleasure and in good times, why aren't you pursuing them in trials and during bad times? But you know how compassionate and good God is. Verse 16 says, so they put away the foreign gods from among them and served the Lord, and he could bear the misery of Israel no longer. So guess what is about to happen? They repent. We're about to get our ninth judge. He's about to raise up Jephthah. And this is what takes us into chapter 11. And so in verse 1, it says, Jephthah was a valiant warrior, but he was the son of a harlot. And Gilead was the father of Jephthah. So Jephthah is considered an outcast. He's driven out. It says in verse 2, they drove Jephthah out and said to him, you shall not have an inheritance in our father's house, for you are the son of another woman. So Jephthah fled from his brothers and lived in the land of Tob. The worthless fellows gathered themselves about Jephthah, and they went out with him. So he has this band of brothers that would be similar to a gang or a mob, but they come back to him. In verse 4, it says, and sometime later, after a little while, when the Ammonites were fighting against Israel, the elders of Gilead went up to Jephthah from the land of Tob. Come, they said, be our commander so we can fight the Ammonites. So they're basically using him. They're going back to get him because they know he can fight. He has this gang, this bunch of thugs, and he's ruthless, and they outcast him because they don't like him. But when it's time for war, they go back and pick him up, and they ask him to fight. And so Jephthah's pushing back. He's saying, didn't you cast me out? Didn't you hate me? And you drove me from my father's house? Like, why do you come to me now when there's trouble? But in the end, Jephthah agrees to go help them. And in verse 12, he sends his messengers to confront the Ammonite king, and he says, hey, what do you have against me that you have attacked my country? Basically, what the Ammonites answer is when Israel came out of Egypt, they took away our land from us. And so Jephthah has to go through and explain that we didn't come take your land from you. And he gives a rundown on the history of Israel and how they got that land and how the Lord gave them that land and they fought for it. And he pushes back against them and says, do you not possess a land where your God gave you? Our God gave us this land. That's in verse 24. And he says in 27, therefore I have not sinned against you, but you are doing me wrong by making war against me. May the Lord the judge today between the sons of Israel and the sons of Ammon. But the king of the sons of Ammon disregarded the message which Jephthah sent. Now we get into some strange territory, and we have to be delicate with this text here because something very wicked happens here, and this is a highly debated text. So verse 29 says that the Spirit of the Lord comes on Jephthah. And so what Jephthah does is he seeks the Lord and he makes a vow with God, but it ends up being a rash vow. This is what he says. He says, God, please, if you will give me the sons of Ammon in my hand, then whatever comes out of the doors of my house to meet me when I return from the place of Ammon, it's yours, God. I will sacrifice it to you as a burnt offering. And so he goes, he strikes down Ammon, he slaughters them. And when he returns back home, guess who comes out of his house? It's in verse 34. Mishpah, his daughter, comes out to meet him celebrating with tambourines and dancing. And look at this in verse 34. Now she was his one and only child. Besides her, he had no sons or daughter. And when he saw her, you know how he reacted. He understands how rash his vow was. It says he tore his clothes. And so let's stop there and grab some practical application. This is something that we can't do when we're in a moment of crises. Just saying anything to get God to move on our behalf. But another thing that we can't accept is God approving these actions. He already told us in the law, in Deuteronomy, not to do this, not to engage in child sacrifice, that's the wicked sin of the other pagan nations. So don't practice that. And so this is a short lesson on hermeneutics. When you're interpreting scripture, we have to make sure what book we're in. And if we're in narrative is very tricky, which is why some exegetes have come up with the slogan, narrative is not normative. And what they mean by that is you don't run the narrative to get instruction. Sometimes the information given to us and depicted to us, it's just that we're learning about the story. It's not any instruction for us to do. So you don't just swoop down in narrative and get instruction to obey. Now, there can be instruction in narrative on what to do and what to follow, but you just have to be careful. Sometimes in narrative, it gives us what not to follow. And so we can't take narrative as prescriptive. We just have to take narrative as just what it is. It's descriptive. And we use the whole counsel of God to figure out what to obey there. And so you have two debates here. One of the debates is, man, why did God fill him with the Spirit? And this was the result of that. And my response to that is, yeah, he filled them with the Spirit to win the war and get the land back like he had been doing the entire book. But he didn't fill them with the Spirit to sacrifice his daughter. And the other debate is, did he really sacrifice his daughter? And so you have a lot of positions there where some people say maybe he just dedicated his daughter to the temple, because the language here is weird. She says, because you did this vow, can I go celebrate with my friends because I will never marry? And they say, that's odd. Like, she's about to be killed and she's talking about marriage, because if it was us, we would be in fear of our lives. So they say maybe it isn't death. But I don't think that's the right way to go, because he said that she would be a burnt offering. And then it says that he goes through with it. And so what I'm grabbing there is after he tore his clothes, she says in verse 37 to her father, let this thing be done for me. Let me alone 2 months that I may go into the mountains and weep because of my virginity, I and my companions. Then he said, go. So she went away for 2 months and left with her companions and wept on the mountains because of her virginity. And at the end of 2 months, she returned to her father, who did to her according to the vow which he had made, and she had no relations with the man. Thus it became a custom in Israel that the daughters of Israel went yearly to commemorate the daughter of Jephthah the Gileadite 4 days in the year. And there you have it. You see how morally bankrupt Israel has gotten. God is still using judges and raising them up. We just saw our ninth one, Jephthah, and we'll continue with him a little more tomorrow. But God is raising these judges up in a time just as wicked as Sodom and Gomorrah. You got idolatry. Now you got child sacrifice. But listen, trust me, it's going to get worse. So let's keep tracking through and looking at how bad Israel gets. Guys, we're just one generation removed from that second generation after Moses, and it got bad that fast. This should humble us to tell us what happens when we don't truly follow God. This is exactly where Satan wants us. He wants to get you to deviate from the word just a little, because if he can get you to deviate just a little, he can get your life to the book of Judges, and he wins. And so my encouragement to you, brothers and sisters, is don't look to the right or to the left. Don't deviate a little. Remember Nadab and Abihu. Just a little deviation is strange fire to God. Let's stay holy. Let's stay pure. Let's stay accurate. And let's stay lappers who depend fully on God, whether we're inexperienced or not. And let's let God fight for us. You guys take care. Talk to you next time.